The story you are about to hear will take you back in time to a city of winding streets and heavy stone walls. This is Prague, in the 14th century, a place where church bells rang in the air, where the voices of merchants echoed along the bridges, and the soft glow of a candle could transform a narrow, shadowed room into a place of warmth and peace. Friends, welcome here. Tonight, we will delve into the life of a candlemaker. Not a great lord, not a knight returning from battle, and not even a merchant counting coins in a chest, but a quiet worker, surrounded by wax and wick, flame in the silence that follows. The rhythm of such a life is slow but steady, marked by the melting of the fat, the dipping of the threads, the cooling of the molds, and the endless cycle of day and night. Candles were not just objects of light. They were threads in the fabric of life itself. They celebrated births and funerals, weddings and wakes, prayers and feasts. Their faint smoke rose to the rafters of chapels, their even glow illuminating the pages of manuscripts or the faces of neighbors gathered in a dark tavern. Making candles meant creating a small permanence, fragile, ephemeral, but vital. And so we slow ourselves to their pace. Imagine the smell of warm wax, faintly sweet, rising in a narrow shop with a small open window to the street. Imagine the gentle scrape of a knife along the wick as each piece is cut to size, carefully arranged into neat bundles. Imagine the melted fat gathering in a pot over low heat, its surface rippling faintly, awaiting the careful dipping of the cords that would become tomorrow's candles. This is not a hurried work. It cannot be hurried. A candle grows over time, just as a loaf of bread must rise or a field must ripen under the sun. Work teaches patience, silence, and devotion. It is not so different from prayer. Listening to this story is like walking alongside him through his day. From the early hours when the wax begins to heat up to the evening when the last candles are arranged in neat rows to dry and the tools are put away to rest. You can hear the scraping of wood, the dripping of wax as it cools, the fluttering of a bird outside the window. You can feel the slow passage of time, measured not by clocks, but by the completion of small, steady tasks. Before we begin, allow yourself to breathe more slowly. Let your thoughts settle as the dust settles in the silence of the workshop. Let the noise of your own day subside so that you can join in the peace of another for a while. This story is not told to quicken the heart, but to soften it, as wax softens before the flame. And while you listen, I invite you to help this little channel continue to shine in its own way. If the silence of these stories brings you peace, be sure to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. It's a small gesture, but one that helps the light spread a little further, just as one candle can pass its flame to another, and then another, until the entire room is ablaze. So, with the faint scent of wax in the air and the unwavering patience of the craftsman at work, let's begin. A day in the life of a candlemaker in 14th century Prague. The morning begins slowly, without rush or fanfare. In the candleman's quarter of Prague, just beyond the quiet banks of the Vltava River, the streets are still coated in the hush of sleep. The year is 1374. It is early spring, and frost clings stubbornly to the wooden shutters. The rooftops wear a soft white sheen, as if dusted with fine flour. Inside a small timber-framed workshop, tucked between a cooper's shed and a bread-maker's shop, a candlemaker named Maciej begins his day. The floorboards creak softly beneath his worn leather shoes as he rises from his straw-stuffed mattress. He stretches slowly, joints stiff from the dampness of the river air. A pale gray light filters through the oiled parchment window. It does not yet reach the corners of the room, where bundles of flax and bowls of hardened wax sit in the shadows. Mate begins not with work, but with silence. He stands for a time, gazing at the small wooden crucifix above his hearth. A single wickless candle, half melted and leaning to one side, rests beside it. It is a votive he made long ago, burned each morning in quiet reverence. He lights it now, striking flint to steel, the spark catching slowly, then the flame blooming with a faint crackle. It gives no scent, no bright light, only a soft orange glow, like a sleepy yawn from the wall. In this stillness, the day finds its first breath. The hearth is stoked next, not for warmth, but to prepare the melting pots. A low fire begins in the stone oven beneath the blackened cauldron. Wax, both beeswax and tallow, awaits melting. It is not yet time. The fire must burn down to embers before the day's true work can begin. Mache steps outside, wrapping a thick wool shawl over his shoulders. The alley is still quiet, but life has begun to murmur. Somewhere a bell tolls from the convent on the hill. A rooster calls out, though sleepily. Footsteps in the distance, perhaps the baker's apprentice, returning with water. He walks slowly to the shared courtyard well. The stone rim is cold to the touch. He draws water, its sound echoing gently in the wooden bucket. The handle creaks, the rope slightly damp from morning dew. This is the same well used by the lamplighter, the soap maker, and the widow who sells salt. It is a quiet, communal space, with moss growing between the cobblestones and cats curled near the sunlit edges. With water drawn, Mate returns. The fire has found its rhythm now, embers glowing with patient heat. He adds a few chips of alderwood, sweet-scented and slow to burn. Then, he begins preparing the day's wax. He works slowly, methodically, never rushing. There are blocks of pale beeswax from a nearby monastery, sweet-smelling and golden. Then, the duller gray tallow, rendered fat from the butcher's offcuts, heavier and smoky. These two substances, one noble and one humble, will become candles for all stations of life. Chapels, taverns, manor houses, and common kitchens. With a wide-bladed knife, Mate begins to cut the wax into chunks, each falling with a soft thud onto the wooden counter. The scent of old honey rises. He hums to himself, a low tune, a hymn he has sung since he was a boy. Outside, the sun climbs higher, but the workshop remains dim. Candles do not need sunlight to be born. By mid-morning, the wax is melting. The cauldron now holds a pool of gold, thick and slow-moving, like cream. Mate stirs it gently with a long iron rod, careful not to disturb the layers too suddenly. He adds a scoop of tallow, and the blend clouds, then clears again as the heat evens out. A subtle scent begins to drift through the room. Warm, animal, faintly sweet. Not unpleasant, but unmistakable. To many in Prague, this smell would signal the approach of market day or Holy Week, times when candles are in great demand. But to Mate, it is simply the smell of home. While the wax melts, he turns to the wicks. They hang from a wooden rack like lengths of pale thread. Made from twisted flax, each one has been soaked in brine and dried. This curing helps them burn evenly, without smoke. He inspects them carefully, trimming the ends and aligning the strands. Each candle must be centered precisely. If not, it will burn poorly, wasting light. The wick dipping begins slowly. He takes 2 wicks at a time, suspending them from a long rod, and lowers them into the hot wax. only a moment, then out again, and hung to cool. This first coat is thin, barely more than a sheen. But with patience and repetition, they will grow fat and even. This process, dipping, drying, dipping again, fills the rest of the morning. The air grows heavy with warmth. The windows are cracked open just slightly, allowing a breeze to carry some of the scent out into the alleyway. Passers-by might smell it and guess rightly that Mate is preparing candles for the monastery again. As the layers grow, the candles begin to take shape, tapered at the top, round and firm in the middle. Each one is like a slow-grown fruit, built not in haste, but through rhythm. Every so often, he stops to wash his hands in the water drawn earlier. The wax clings to his fingers. He wipes them on a linen cloth, yellowed from years of use. There are no words spoken, no audience, only the quiet repetition of craft. Outside, the city stirs a little more. Wheels turn on cobbles. A child laughs. Somewhere a lute plays a soft, wandering tune. But within the workshop, time moves slowly, and the candles continue to grow. At midday, the bells ring from the town square. Not loudly, but in a distant, sonorous tone that floats through the stone corridors of the city like a drifting cloud. Mate steps away from his work. The candles hang in rows, drying gently, their surfaces smooth and glistening. Some have grown thick enough now to be considered finished. Others need a few more dips, but they will wait. Now is the hour for bread and rest. He sits by the hearth, where the fire has settled into low coals. From a small cupboard, he retrieves a coarse brown loaf, wrapped in cloth, and a bit of aged cheese, crumbly and pale. He pours a cup of warm ale, flat but comforting, and eats slowly, without ceremony. As he eats, he watches the candle flames on the workbench flicker gently. They are not for sale, only testers. Each one burns with a quiet, steady light. That is all he asks of them. From outside comes the faint sound of singing. A group of women pass down the alley, washerwomen from the river, humming a Marian hymn as they carry their loads home. The sound is soft, echoing off the walls in gentle harmonies. It does not interrupt the stillness, rather, it adds to it. Mate closes his eyes. This is his favorite part of the day, not for the rest, nor the food, but for the sound of life moving gently past his door. When the song fades, he returns to the workshop. Now comes the shaping. The candles must be trimmed, the bottoms flattened, the tips checked for taper and symmetry. He works with a small knife, smoothing each one like a sculptor. They do not need to be beautiful, only even balanced, ready to burn without complaint. Some are for the abbey, some for the shrine near the bridge, and a few for the merchant's house at the far end of the quarter. Each has its purpose. In one corner, he keeps the misfits, those that lean too far or cool too quickly. They are not wasted. They will be melted again, born anew. He stacks the finished candles in wooden trays lined with straw. They will travel tomorrow, carried by cart to their destinations. The room smells richly now of wax, ash, and wool. Outside, the light softens, shadows lengthen. The sun begins its slow descent behind the spires of Prague. And still the candles wait, suspended in rows, catching the last gold of the afternoon. As the sun sinks behind the tiled rooftops, the workshop cools. Mate prepares the evening tapers, smaller, thinner candles used for prayers, for bedtime, for soft night watchings beside the sick or aged. These are not dipped, but poured. He warms a clay mold by the hearth and ladles wax carefully into its narrow mouth. The wick is already threaded, kept taut by a small stick at the top. He fills the mold slowly, waiting between pours to let the wax settle evenly. Each taper is poured with care. They are the quietest candles, meant not for grand feasts or high altars, but for the moments between wakefulness and sleep, between worry and peace. He pours a dozen. Outside, the sounds of the city dim. Horses return to stables. Doors close. Fires are lit. From far across the river, a horn sounds once, a signal that the bridge gates are closing for the night. Mache lights one of the fresh evening tapers. Its flame is soft, almost apologetic. It casts a small glow on the wall, where shadows dance like monks in procession. He says nothing, but stands still, watching. The workshop is now dim, lit only by this single taper and the embers of the hearth. The rows of candles shine faintly, like suspended suns asleep in the dusk. He does not rush to extinguish the fire. He lets it die slowly as the night deepens. Outside, the stars begin to appear, faint at first, then gathering strength. A breeze moves through the cracks in the shutters. It carries the scent of wet stone, distant wood smoke, and faintly, the city's night breath. He tidies the tools, folds the cloths, and wipes the wax from his hands. By candlelight, the workshop becomes a place of rest. The work is done for the day, and the light remains, gentle, unwavering. Mache's home is small, just 2 rooms, one for sleeping and keeping warm, the other for washing and preparing food, though rarely more than a bowl of soup or a heel of bread. There is no luxury here, only familiarity. He enters softly, candle first, like a traveler greeting his own walls. The room accepts him in silence. The wooden beams above creak slightly in the night air. The only sound save for the settling crackle of the hearth stones as they cool. He places the candle in a simple holder, carved wood, blackened at the base from years of use, and sets it on the window sill. It casts just enough light to find his way about the room. A folded blanket, a stool, a rough chest with a few worn shirts, a bowl of dried herbs gathered from a field path last summer. He does not rush to sleep. First, he removes the wax from his fingers with warm water and ash soap. He wipes down his tools, a small knife, a trimming scissor, a loop of twine. They are stored in a basket near the wall, where they will remain undisturbed until morning. Then he kneels beside his bed. No word spoken, only a gesture, a breath, a moment of stillness to mark the close of day. The flame dances beside him, casting its gentle glow across the linen sheet and straw-stuffed mattress. The bed creaks as he lies down. The pillow is lumpy, but familiar. He shifts once, then again, then stills. The candle continues to burn, watched by no one. On the far wall, shadows ripple with the faint movement of the flame. Shapes that have no name, no urgency, only presence. Outside, the city murmurs its last sounds. A cartwheel, a door latch, the long sigh of the wind winding its way down from the castle heights. Inside, the wax cools. The wick shortens. Sleep settles slowly over the room, soft as falling ash. The candle will burn for another hour, but Mache is already gone. Adrift in dreams of rivers, wax and light. Dawn in Prague does not shout. It arrives in layers. First, a faint lightening of the eastern sky, barely enough to color the rooftops. Then, the slow creak of shutters, one by one, from those who rise early, brewers, nuns, porters, and sometimes candle makers. Then, the bells. They do not clang or roar. Instead, the market bell tolls in a slow, round rhythm, like a yawn given form. It sounds from the tower near the meat stalls, carried on the morning mist that rises from the river. Maciej hears it, eyes still closed. He does not rise immediately. The bed is still warm. The straw pillow has shifted into a small valley under his cheek. But the bell sounds again, and he breathes deeply, then sits. The candle he lit the night before has burned itself out. Only a small nub of wax remains, hardened beside the holder. A ring of soot circles the wood where the flame once danced. He opens the shutters a finger's width. The light is pale, blue-gray. The rooftops glisten again with frost. A dog trots across the square, tail held low. A woman with 2 baskets on her shoulders passes slowly, one full of eggs, the other of dried greens. The day has begun. Maciej dresses slowly, wool tunic, undershirt, leather shoes, still damp from yesterday. He folds his blanket and places the spent candle stub in a basket for remelting. Today is market day. That means candles must be delivered. He takes the wooden tray prepared yesterday, filled with straw and lined with short, thick candles of the monastery blend, and covers it with cloth. The wax within still smells faintly of honey and smoke. A good scent, a clean scent. He leaves with the tray balanced carefully in his arms. Outside, the morning grows. The city does not yet bustle, but it breathes. Carts creak, boots scuff. Distant chickens protest their relocation. He walks toward the square. The market is a patchwork of stalls. Strips of canvas overhead, tied between timber posts. The colors are faded, brown, gray, ochre, stained by years of smoke, sun, and rain. Beneath them, merchants set out their wares with quiet efficiency. No shouting yet, just arrangement. Turnips still caked in soil, loaves wrapped in cloth, pots stacked like tower blocks, bundles of rushes, dried fish, and sacks of barley. Maciej moves gently through them all. He knows where to go, a low table near the stone steps of the chapel wall. Here, he lays out his candles, 3 rows sorted by size, tapers, table candles, and the stout ones for lanterns and altars. He does not speak loudly. He nods to familiar faces, the cobbler's sister, the man who trades in ink, the old woman with red scarves who always buys the misshapen candles for her shrine. The candles draw a few glances. One merchant picks up a taper, sniffs it, nods. Another asks if he has more of the honeyed ones, the kind that don't drip. Maciej smiles. He will make more next week. The market hums, not a roar, just the gentle chorus of commerce. Children dart between stalls. A dog naps beneath a crate of pears. Somewhere, someone plays a slow tune on a reed flute. He sells a few candles. Just enough. Not all are bought. Some are admired, then returned to the cloth. That is fine. Light is not always needed at once. It waits. He does not push for coin. He barters when needed, candles for a length of dyed thread, for dried beans, or a new wooden spoon. The market is not just economy. It is rhythm, familiarity. When his tray is lighter, he wraps the rest. The market bells toll once more, midday. He walks home, a little slower, the tray nearly empty, the scent of wax now mingled with apples, ash, and iron. The workshop awaits, and so does the next round of melting. Back in the workshop, Maciej places the unsold candles on a shelf near the back wall, the holding shelf, as he calls it in his mind. They rest there without urgency. Candles do not mind waiting. He removes his shawl, warms his hands by the fire, and sits at the workbench. The hearth is low, but he adds a few small logs. Not for heat, the room is warm enough, but for the steady flame needed to melt the next batch. Today, he prepares a special order. A monk from the chapel near the Charles Bridge had stopped by last week. He asked for a dozen beeswax candles, No tallow, no mixture, only the clean, golden wax from the monastery hives. They will be used during Lent for the evening readings and silent vigils. The candles must be perfect, steady burning, clean, modest, but bright enough to light a psalter page. Mathieu unwraps a block of beeswax from a linen cloth. Its surface is soft, lightly freckled with flecks of pollen and faint marks from the hives. He breaks it into smaller pieces, placing them into the iron pot hanging above the hearth. The wax melts slowly. As it does, the scent rises, richer than tallow, and somehow warmer. It is not the sharp, honeyed sweetness of fresh comb, but something aged and softened. It fills the workshop like memory. He dips the wicks, one pair, then another, letting each cool before dipping again. Each candle will take hours to build, one layer at a time, each pass through the wax like a brush stroke. Between dips, he sits quietly, trimming and turning. The only sounds are the soft clicks of the tools, the occasional sigh of the fire, and a faint breeze teasing the window shutter. In the corner, a small bowl of rosemary and lavender sits by the door. It was a gift from the midwife who lives 3 houses down. She burns them in her own hearth to keep illness at bay. Mathieu leaves them untouched, but nearby, not for superstition, but for comfort. He dips again, and again. The chapel candles grow, their sides smooth, round, slowly becoming the vessels of soft light they are meant to be. No adornment, no flourish, just quiet work for quiet prayer. By late afternoon, the wax has grown thick and sluggish in the pot. The fire is low again, barely more than coals. The air is warmer now, filled with the layered scent of beeswax, wood smoke, flax thread, and faint ash. Mathieu sets the last of the chapel candles on the drying rack. They are not yet ready to burn, but their shape is finished. They rest in perfect silence, casting long amber shadows across the table as the sun filters through the workshop window. He begins the slow ritual of cleaning. Tools are wiped with linen and placed in their box. The wax-covered knife is held briefly over the warm hearth to loosen its coating before being polished. A few spent wicks are trimmed and tied for kindling. The dipping rods are hung on the back wall, their handles smooth from years of use. The clay mold for tapers is washed with warm water, then turned upside down to dry on the shelf. The wax pot is lifted carefully from its hook and placed to one side to cool overnight. He brushes the workbench with a handful of old straw. Each movement is unhurried. To the visitor, it might seem like cleaning. But to Mathieu, it is a closing ritual. The room slowly empties of tension, like a drawn breath finally exhaled. The wax still clings to the air, but the tools now sleep. A few of the candles, not the chapel ones, but older, irregular ones, are placed in a basket. He'll bring them to the midwife tomorrow. She uses them during births, for calming the room. 1 or 2 she trades for eggs or broth. He sets the basket near the door. The room grows dimmer as the sun slips lower behind the rooftops. Shadows gather like folds of cloth in the corners of the room. The air changes, not colder, but stiller. He lights a single taper. Not to work, but to sit. He pulls a stool to the corner of the room near the door, where the candlelight does not fully reach, and rests his hands in his lap. They are lined, darkened with wax stains, but still steady. He sits with the candle as the light fades. Nothing moves. Nothing needs to. The next morning, the air carries the scent of smoke and river mud. Signs that rain may be near. Mathieu wraps the chapel candles in cloth, 3 to a bundle, each placed gently into a wicker basket lined with straw. He covers them, knots the cloth with care, and steps into the morning light. The sky is overcast. The sun is hidden. But the day goes on. He walks slowly toward the river, through narrow streets that wind like braids between crooked houses. The stones are slick from dew. A baker's boy whistles. A woman carries a basket of onions. A rooster complains faintly from behind a fence. As he reaches the chapel gate, he removes his hat. The monk at the door greets him with a silent nod. No words are needed. The basket is exchanged. A small purse of coins is pressed into his palm, heavier than usual, likely in thanks for the pure beeswax. The monk disappears into the chapel, and Mate watches him go. From within, faint chanting can be heard, a slow melody, sung not for performance, but for rhythm, for remembrance. He turns to leave, walking slowly back toward the quarter. Along the way, he passes a narrow alley and stops. There, under a crooked lintel, the midwife sits on a stool. A young woman stands near her, eyes wide, belly full with child. Mate steps forward and offers the basket. The midwife peers inside, nods once, and reaches into a small pouch. Not coins, but dried apples and a sliver of aged cheese. A quiet trade. No one speaks. He smiles, tips his hat, and walks on. The light that once lived in his workshop now waits in other places. In chapels, in birthrooms, in shrines and kitchens. He does not see it again, not often. But he knows it continues. That is the purpose. Candles are not meant to stay. Mate returns to the workshop at dusk. The room is still, the fire cold, the tools quiet. A few new blocks of tallow sit on the shelf, a delivery from the butcher's apprentice, left earlier. He will melt them tomorrow. Tonight, there is nothing to build. He lights a taper. Its glow slowly unfolds across the walls. The drying rack is empty now. The table is clean. The knife lies at rest. But the light, it moves. Just a little. It flickers toward the windows, toward the door. Mate opens the shutters. Outside, Prague glows faintly under the first light of stars. Somewhere in the quarter, a lute plays. Somewhere, a fire is stoked. Somewhere, a door is closed for the night. He places the taper in the center of the room. Its flame is small. It doesn't reach the corners, but it does not need to. He sits on his stool, facing the candle. In the quiet, he can hear the wax whisper as it melts. Not loudly, not insistently. Just a faint sigh, like a memory settling into place. And so, the day ends. Not with ceremony, not with conclusion, but with continuation. Another candle will be lit tomorrow. Another wick will be dipped. Another block of wax cut with the old knife at the same table, beneath the same rafters. The work never truly ends. But for now, the workshop sleeps. And the candle, the last of the day, burns gently on.